So tonight, episode 101 of Don't Talk, or sorry, episode 102 of Don't Talk TV, we've got another live stream for you, and we've got another excellent guest. We're going to have Kyle Kemper, perhaps best known as the half brother of Justin Trudeau, but I mean, he's a man of accomplishment in his own right, and really looking forward to having an excellent conversation with him tonight and with our viewers. Good evening. My name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So as I said in the preamble there, we've got another live chat tonight. Now, unfortunately, there's a bit of a scheduling conflict for Mr. Kemper. He's said he wasn't going to be able to get on until about 7, but we'd already pre-scheduled this for 6:30. I didn't want to leave viewers hanging, so we're starting at 6:30. And you'll have me to yourself for about half an hour or whenever Mr. Kemper shows up. Once he gets in, we'll hit the ground running. But in the meantime, hit me with your questions. Last time when we did this, when we had Mr. Bernier and Viva Fry on, YouTube wasn't letting us do super chats, apparently because I had committed the crime of saying that Justin Trudeau's not guilty of hate crime. I still haven't been able to figure that one out, but it looks like we can do super chat this time. So please try it out. See if it actually does work. Maybe you can be the first ever super chatter in Don't Talk TV history. So again, hit me with your questions. Happy to answer anything. Although one thing I won't, well, maybe I will answer, but I'm just going to warn you right now. If you come at me with the Bill of Rights stuff, I know people were asking on the last episode with Maxime Bernier and Viva Fry, oh, why aren't you talking about the Bill of Rights? Well, I'll tell you up front right now why we didn't talk about the Bill of Rights and why I don't ever talk about the Bill of Rights, except for the one episode I did explaining the very limited use of the Bill of Rights. And that's what it comes down to. The Bill of Rights is of very limited use. It only applies to federal statutes. So it only applies to a federal law. So if the law itself, as written, violates the Bill of Rights, and it's a federal law, so things like the Reopening Ontario Act, that's not going to apply. It's not going to work with that. But I see we've got Kyle Kemper with us. So
I'm here, Nicholas. Such a pleasure to meet you.
Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, and thanks for getting in. Thanks for getting in a bit early, because I know we were looking at 7, but we'd already scheduled it for 6:30. So
yeah,
thank you very much.
We're here. Made it happen. It's it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for all that you've been doing with DTTV.
Yeah, that's right. Well, thank you very much. Well, I mean, I did a very quick intro, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. I mean, I guess, unfortunately, a lot of people, the first thing we think of is like, oh, you're Justin Trudeau's half brother. But I know you're a man in your own right, and you're an activist. I know that you host Love and Freedom, the Love and Freedom show, another video cast. But maybe just tell us a little bit about you and what you're all about.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I mean, I've been really focused on crypto since 2013, and when all this kind of COVID hysteria commenced, I was kind of questioning it at all. And but before that, who am I? I'm a father. Oh, I've got my child right here. Sequoia, Daddy's on the call right now. I can't make that. Go talk to Mama. Okay, go talk to Mama. Liberty, please. Thank you. And can close the door too. Thank you. Sorry, Nicholas. Very exciting times in the Kemper household this evening. Yeah. So I'm from Ottawa originally. I grew up with my mother was Margaret Trudeau, so my brother Justin is my half brother, and I also have a brother Alexandre Trudeau and a late Michelle Trudeau. And then I also have a full sister named Alicia. My father is named Fried. He was in real estate and restaurants in Ottawa. I kind of grew up looking at business, kind of as my focus. Went to Dalhousie University out in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I studied business and commerce and a little bit of philosophy and some law there. Then afterwards, I worked in venture capital and then in technology. And when I first saw Bitcoin, I really believe that this might be a scalpel to the cancer that is the central banking system.
Hmm.
And yeah, so that's a little bit about my story. And I've worked in all sorts of different industries. But Nicholas, tell me a little bit about yourself too, and your platform that you've built here with Don't Talk Television, and Don't Talk to Police. I noticed was one of the other hashtags.
Yeah, well, that's why it's called Don't Talk TV, because the theme is don't talk to police, don't talk to the state. So, I mean, I've been a criminal lawyer for 17 years now, and I'd always been kind of had in my mind the idea of doing a podcast or a video thing, because I noticed there are lots of American lawyers on YouTube, but there weren't a lot of Canadian lawyers. So I've been kind of thinking of it from an educational perspective to give people kind of, here's what the Canadian law is like, because you see lots of American terminology and American stuff because that's what people have the most access to. Kind of procrastinated. I mean, I know what it's like with the kids. I've got 5 children of my own. So,
Well
just
done.
kind of always busy with stuff. But then when COVID hit, then it was getting up to Christmas of 2020 when I just said to myself, I've got to get off my butt and do this, because now more than ever, people need to understand what their rights are. They need to get some education about, what the law is. And so I started, episode 1 was about the fact that you have the right to not answer your door, because here, as you know, here in Ontario for Christmas of 2020, we had a stay-at-home order. We weren't allowed to have Christmas dinner. We weren't allowed to have family gatherings. We weren't allowed to go out of the house. We weren't allowed to go to church. So, I thought people need to realize that you have no obligation to answer the door. So obviously I wasn't recommending people to break the law, but if someone happened to be having a Christmas dinner, they don't have to answer the door. And then, I mean, that's, we have our rights for a reason. And I often say rights are like anything else. You use it or lose it. And we haven't used a lot of our rights over the last 2 years, and we sure have lost a lot of them collectively as Canadians.
Isn't that the truth? And that's something like, I think a lot of us have been, really wary of. I know in the very beginning of this whole, I think it was in April of 2020 when I recorded a video about, warning people that, this would be used as an excuse to take away our rights, and that, they'll never let a good crisis go to waste. And, sure enough, here we are. And I mean, gosh, Christmas of last year, they were coming to people's doors, right? And the threat that was the subliminal programming of Canadian society to believe that human beings are walking threat vectors, and that the human species and the human collections is something to be afraid of, was so effective that I remember coming back to Canada in summer of 2020 from America, and my family was terrified of me, or like some of my family members were terrified of me. They would say more than 5, like, they would, you know, just avoid us for our 14-day quarantine kind of period. And it was really terrible. There's a question that, hey, Patrick.
Yeah, Patrick, thanks for doing the super
You got
chat.
a super chat.
Works, and Patrick Peace is the first ever super chatter for Don't Talk TV. So thanks for the question. So let me just read it out here. Do you think Justin Trudeau will face charges for any misdeeds such as SNC Lavalin cover-up, AgaCon trip, conflicts of interest, etc.? I'm going to say no, he won't. I mean, when do people at the pinnacle of power in any country ever face justice for things like that? I mean, the boat's already sailed on the AgaCon thing. The RCMP apparently investigated it, and they deemed charges were not necessary. SNC Lavalin as well. I mean, that's over and done with. They're not going to dredge that up and bring charges now. yeah, I just don't. In my view, it's just not going to happen. Kyle, what do you think?
I'm not going to speak specifically to any of the issues, but there are many things that I think beyond Justin that many politicians, from conflicts of interest to to insider information to as Pat King was charged with perjury and obstruction of justice. I mean, gosh, they could all be leveled with that charge.
Yeah.
Like that if they want to start throwing around perjury and obstruction of justice, gosh, they all could fit underneath that category. But I will say that the public court of public opinion has definitely, I think, like many people have found them guilty of many heinous acts. And it's a real challenge because I feel like Justin. Well, I mean, not a real challenge. It's the wrong word to say, but I think I feel a little bit kind of, obviously he's my brother. I love Justin very much. I'm really sad to see where it's gone. Like, him and I have drifted further and further apart over the years. And I would say, like, policy wise, that the handling of COVID is a complete, it's complete disgrace. And that, unfortunately, Justin is probably like, he's a prisoner in my from my point of view. He cannot be speaking in this type of forum
Yeah,
openly.
that's interesting, and that kind of segues into one thing that I wanted to ask you, if you're comfortable with it. Is, to me, I mean, I'm an outsider, so I mean, obviously, I don't know the real Justin Trudeau the way you do, but I've seen what he said in Parliament, what he's said in other venues, and although I've always vehemently disagreed with his politics, which is fine. I mean, we live in a free country, or we did live in a free country, so people can have different views. I always vehemently disagreed with his politics, but my impression was that once upon a time he at least seemed to me to be what I would consider kind of an honest liberal. Like, he actually believed that people have the right to have differing opinions. There should be like actual tolerance, like tolerance of different viewpoints. But it seems to me that really in the last year, because before that, I have to say, despite my vehement disagreement with his politics, I thought he was actually pretty decent for the first year of COVID. Most of all the bad stuff was coming at the provincial level in terms of lockdowns and taking away people's rights. It was only in the last year that, and really since the summer of 2021, and then he went full bore with the, like, anyone who disagrees with him, it's a tiny fringe minority. They're Nazis, they're racists, they're misogynists. And then finally culminating in, if you disagree with me, you're going to jail and I'm seizing all your assets. So, I mean, what's he really like? Has he changed?
I mean,
Has
come
he
on.
always,
Like,
has he
do you
always been
think Justin?
someone who no contradiction?
You think Justin was the one who decided let's enact the Emergencies Act? You think Justin's the one writing the scripts? You think he's the one writing the tweets? No way, no chance. Justin
Okay.
is in my opinion is the one is being set up to be the brunt of all the energy and all that negative energy, similar to Klaus Schwab, is being set up, similar to World Economic Forum, to be frank, is being set up to take a lot of this energy in, a lot of this hate and anger in onto the individual, when it's the apparatus, it's the whole party, it's the policy, it's who's his chief of staff, who's his secretary, who are the people around him, who are the people that are making his decision. He's just reading scripts. He's not actually engaging in open debate. He's not speaking in the House of Commons. He's not answering anything. It's like, and this is why there's so much on Justin, and there's so much blame on Justin. And I understand that is the game. They wanted him. They propped him up like this amazing individual, this amazing character, and now they're tearing him down like a super villain. And I'm grateful, that he's doing this, because it's actually pushing all of us to innovate and create and realize that this is more like, we're realizing this is the Wizard of Oz, and there's men behind the curtains who are pulling the strings. And if we can just shine the light on those folks, they're basically shadows and they'll disappear as soon as the light is shone upon them. And we're in this beautiful age of 2022 when we have access to all this exponential technology. So, why can we not, like I feel it's critically important that we start implementing accountability, responsibility via code, because we have all this data. It's just like, I feel like, who was said the other day, Kevin O'Leary, it's like Canada has more resources, more access to anything, but we're being managed like by the worst team ever.
Mm.
And I think that is fully true. I think the Liberals are horrible. I think the party, the government system is a mess. It's a centralized, secretive, corrupt system. Liberals are corrupt, NDP is corrupt, conservatives are corrupt. They're all corrupt. They all vote for themselves. They don't represent the people. The people, I would say probably, the conservatives are the one of the top three parties that, cares a little bit about what the people think. The PPC, certainly. I know you had Max Bernier on your show. Like, I feel like the PPC is probably a very strong voluntarist party of people who actively want to be engaged in shaping the future of tomorrow. But I would say that the deep bases of the Liberals and the Conservatives are not active and do not actually consider a lot of the policies. I always refer to my 101-year-old grandfather. I love him to death. He's amazing. And he'll just vote Liberal because he's always voted Liberal. Now, if he were to vote on specific issues, if he were actually, offered the ability to participate on an issues as opposed to just parties and colors,
Right.
then there would likely be some differences of opinion. There would
Yeah,
likely be
well,
some
I'm thinking
opinion.
if he's 101 years old and he's been voting Liberal his whole life, I mean, the Team Red he was voting for back in the 70s, 80s, 90s is totally, totally different from what Team Red is today.
And he came from Team Red in Germany too. He escaped Team Red in Germany following World War II. And now look at where Team Red is today, having hijacked, liberal, the word. It's supposed to mean free. And this is part of this modern warfare against words and the lexicon and the diction of society. And all this ridiculous projection too. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, the groups that are the most hate-filled seem to be the anti-hate groups. Like Antifa, seem
Where
to be
they
the
claim to
most
be the
fascistic.
anti-hate groups.
Well, exactly. It's like Antifa are basically supporting the fascists, and
Well, and then they call people who are in favor of freedom fascists, which is like
yeah,
so opposite. Like people are out there saying, "Oh, we want the right to go out and breathe the air unimpeded and go to work." Oh, you're a fascist. I mean, that's the opposite
they're
of fascism.
standing with people who wave swastikas, Nicholas.
Yeah,
And then
well, and
literally the
then
next day, you've got
yeah,
Christian Freeland
but
out there, standing with people with the
well,
bit. Oh my
she's
gosh!
standing there with a hand on the flag of the UPA, and I did an episode on this because my grandmother's whole family, her whole town, they were Polish. They were all massacred by the UPA back in 1942, I think, 41 or 42. I mean, but it's okay for Chrystia Freeland to hold that banner, that's associated with them. But I just want to circle back. I think the point you made is a really good one about, I mean, this isn't the focus is on Justin Trudeau. He's kind of been put up there. He's the public face of the government, but it's not really him. I mean, if he were to step down as prime minister tomorrow, it's not like any of these policies would change. And that's what I've said to people. People are like, oh, we need to get him charged. I mean, I'm not going to get into whether he deserves to be charged with anything or not, but even assuming he were guilty of some criminal wrongdoing and he were arrested, charged, convicted, that wouldn't change anything in our government. But I guess just to go back to my question, I mean, based on growing up with him and living with him, is it your view that if it were up to him, he wouldn't be doing a lot of the stuff that's going on, and he wouldn't be saying the stuff that he's saying about, anyone who disagrees with him being misogynist and racist?
Yeah, I mean, those words were so inflammatory and they're so poorly chosen. It's like, are you kidding me? Why did you say that? Using words like unacceptable to refer to a large swath of Canadian society? How do you do that? Like, that is unacceptable. Like, we don't make harsh judgments. I mean, that's the kind of thing that like his father would spank him on his bottom for, like, for using that type of language.
Yeah.
Um,
So we got a question here from Kimberly Riddell. Thanks for the question. So it says, if Justin Trudeau is basically a puppet, does the same hold true for Pierre as in, oh, and she says, I don't mean Poilievre. So I suppose she's meaning Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Was he just a puppet as well?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean, maybe I feel like Pierre was like a really, and I don't mean any disrespect to Justin either. Justin is very intelligent. Like, Justin is very intelligent. He's not the most intelligent when he's not an expert when it comes to, like, business or like economics, or I mean, he's become probably a master of political strategy a little bit. But he's really good with people and really good with connecting with people. I think Pierre was also really good, but Pierre also had like a law background as well. And I mean, I can't really share too much onto that. But I would also say, like, let's ask about Polyev too. Like, I mean, there's questions there, and I think there's a real question of like putting a lot of hope into individuals to be the answer for self freedom,
right.
when it's like, collectively, how can we realize self freedom by, standing in our power? And I think that's where it's important, like people like yourself, Nicholas, to tell people, like, you don't have to open the door. No, you don't have to do that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to sign that contract if you're under duress. If you're under duress when you sign a contract, like, doesn't it's an invalid contract.
Yeah.
Like, we have a legal system. Like, what do you think, Nicholas? What happened to the legal system? What
Uh,
happened? Where are we? How do we get it back? What's it going to take?
well, I think the answer to the legal system is the same as the answer to the political system. Is uh, this is really a cultural war that we're in the midst of, and the culture needs to change before these other things can change, because politics are downstream of culture, the law, the courts are downstream of culture. So, what happened to the courts? I think Canadian culture happened to the courts, and it's been a slow progression. I mean, I was called to the bar in 2005. I just in my own career, from law school in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, up to today, I've seen the slow erosion of our rights, and the courts and the parliament just slowly chipping away at the charter, and they nip at the peripheries and at things that people aren't going to get up in arms about, right? So, drunk driving. Well, no one likes drunk driving. So, who's going to argue against that when we just basically make drunk driving into guilty till proven innocent? I mean, that's basically how the drunk driving laws work. They set the precedent with drunk driving laws of the whole, you can't question the science. I think with the breathalyzers, it's written right into the criminal code that the breathalyzers are infallible. Personally, I don't believe any machine is infallible. I mean, machine's a machine. It can have glitches. It could be out of repair, but that's in the criminal code. So, I mean, to me, that's a big erosion of right. All different search things. Again, no one likes drug dealers, so let's change the laws so that it gets easier and easier and easier to do search warrants on drug dealers, or arrest them without a warrant, or things like that, or domestic violence. Well, no one likes an abuser, so we got zero tolerance now. We got, this and this. So it slowly over the last 20, 25 years, things have been chipped away. I mean, we had kind of a golden age through the 80s and 90s in terms of our rights and the Charter rights and freedoms being respected, and that's been slowly chipped away at. That combined with the fact of, again, I come back to the cultural thing. Who are the judges? I mean, they're human beings, right? So they're human beings. So, like Canadian society, I would say 80 to 90% of Canadian society, they kind of bought in hook, line, and sinker to the whole COVID narrative. They bought into the fear. They bought into the, trust the science. Most judges are baby boomers who lived through like the golden era of Canada. They can't, I think it's hard for people who lived through such a great time to conceptualize the prospect of like Canada isn't perfect anymore. That's why I find like people like my wife who grew up under communism in Poland, they have a totally different perspective on all the COVID stuff, because they're like, hey, we've lived through this before. We know what this is all about. We're not going along with it. Whereas the average Canadian is like, no, our government, they're good. They're good. They take care of us and that. So you got people like that who are the judges. You've got to get appointed to the bench. I think you've got to be a very kind of respectable, a normie, right? You got to be like a normie of normies. No controversy, nothing that anyone's going to say like, who's this weirdo that you appointed to the bench? Like, he has some weird views, right? So when you got people like that, and then judges have colleagues, no one wants to be that guy who sided with the crazy people who are challenging the COVID laws. So I think that's my personal view of
right. And when society has like this normalized kind of view that we are the crazy people and the respectable judges don't want to be aligned with the crazy people, I mean, how, like, what point does that situation flip? And also, it's like, how willfully blind will these judges and prosecutors be in plugging their ears and shielding their eyes from clear evidence that is painting a different picture, that requires one to challenge mainstream narrative assumptions. And while I know, I think we've all have dealt with this, like people in our lives, just they don't want to, like they're kind of afraid to do that.
Yeah.
And like, sorry, but if you're a judge, like the cowardice element, like you're afraid to stand up, like get the F out then.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I mean, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's what you get paid the big bucks for, is to make the tough decisions, make the unpopular decisions. But I mean, I started my career as a prosecutor. So, maybe this is maybe a little bit of inside baseball, but I think it's okay. I just remember as a young prosecutor, like right after I was called to the bar, the first 3.5 years of my career was a prosecutor. I just remember my colleagues, especially the more junior ones, were always in terror that they'd lose their job if they made one misstep or they didn't do things exactly the way the higher ups or in a way that was deemed appropriate. I personally think that fear was unfounded. I mean, I did a whole bunch of quote unquote crazy stuff, right? I mean, I remember not to toot my own horn, but I dropped more charges than I prosecuted, even as a first, second, third year prosecutor, because I went into that job with the perspective of, I have the power of life and death over people here as a prosecutor, because I have the discretion of whether I'm going to prosecute them or not. And I'm going to have to answer for all of that at the end of my life, because I'm a Catholic. I believe that when I die, I'm going to be judged by God for everything I did with my life. And I'm going to be judged especially for things that I've done from a position of power. So that was the view I had. That's why I dumped tons of cases, because if I had any doubt, I wasn't going to do it. But that's not the mentality of a lot of people. It's just that constant fear. And I'm not disparaging people. I totally understand that it's terrifying to be staring down the barrel of losing your livelihood. Most people are, and this comes back to, there's all these different factors in our society and culture that interplay, but so many people are just leveraged right to the gills with the mortgage, the car loan, the line of credit. I mean, cost of living has been up and up and up and up and up for like 40 years.
And all of a sudden, hey, if I make a donation, I'm going to lose my bank account. Like, well, I'm definitely not going to do that, right?
Right. But I mean, even aside from that, I think a lot of people, they're basically wage slaves, right? Like they're slaves to their employers because they're living paycheck to paycheck. And I mean, I think like so many people are nowadays. And so they're just, so that's something like, I'm not looking down on people. I mean, I still think you need to do the right thing, especially when you're in a position of power. Judges, prosecutors, police. I understand the fear, but you got to do what's right.
Yes, sir. These questions that are coming.
So I just want to go back to a question. Actually, I see Kristen Benet is asking a question about talking about a letter that was presented to the British courts to correct an error of omission in the Constitution. Honestly, I'm not aware of that. I don't really follow British politics or legal stuff, so that's something I'm not aware of. If can maybe post a link. My volunteer PR guy, Richard, he's running the studio for us. I forgot to give him a shout out earlier. So give it to him or send it. He'll get it to us. And remember, we got super chats going. So if you want to make sure your comment gets noticed, you can do that. We've already had one super chat, so I know it's working. But to go back to a somewhat similar question, we had a question earlier that it was up on the screen. I didn't answer at the time because we were in the middle of something, but my apologies if I mispronounce this, but Nageek Sebi asked a question about whether it's possible to reverse bills that have received royal assent. Yes, I mean, there's two ways. Constitutional challenges in the court and convincing the court to strike down a law as unconstitutional, or, I mean, a future government can always rescind any law that's in effect. A future government can rescind that. But, that all comes down to, again, that culture war and changing, I think it happens one person at a time, just changing the prevailing views in Canada so that the stuff that's considered extreme nowadays, which was once totally mainstream, will once again be mainstream again.
Yeah, I think common sense needs to be kind of, made mainstream, and tolerating discussion about facts, social media, and the extreme polarity within society, especially in the Twitter, Facebook, just typing versus actual communicating, combined with, for many people, a year plus disassociation and disconnection from true human connection with others.
Yeah.
Has made people more, maybe, I don't know, I don't want to say people in general, but has inflicted a lot of hurt and damage on a great many people, to the point where are potentially lacking empathy for engaging with others,
Yeah.
and being able to engage in a critical discussion, instead of it comes down to fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or name calling, or guilt by association. I mean, I feel we see this a lot, in social media, where people will just somehow a defense to an argument, an acceptable defense to an argument these days, is to say, well, that's conspiracy theory. Or
Right.
that's extreme. That's dangerous. That's misinformation. That's all you need to say. And that's that. So I'm sorry, but no, that doesn't stand up in court. You can't say that. Sir, that woman said that you struck her in the head with a hammer. That's misinformation. No, this is, I mean, we must go through, and be able to have reasoned debates about this. And it's okay for us to have different opinions, but also there's just been this word, I'm not sure if you've noticed it, Nicholas, but I certainly have, of this word coming up called post-truth society. I guess it's 3 words, but post-truth society. And it's it at its core, it infers that we're entering this neverland where there is no truth. Where it's you can have a different truth, where 1 + 1 might equal 2 for me, but 1 + 1 might equal 3 for you. And how can we find common ground, or basis in reality, and if we're not, or be able to operate effectively as a society, if we can't have some foundational tenets and be able to understand that, when it's when the evidence is overwhelmingly, I guess this is why we have juries, right? To take into account the facts and to make a decision. So
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head, though, going back to the social media thing. I think it's so much easier when you're typing and you're typing to some stranger who's just like a little, some picture, some avatar, not even a real person. It's easy to call that person a conspiracy theorist or an idiot or a fascist or whatever than it is to say to someone's face. Like, I mean, there's a lot of people that, I mean, not a lot of people, but there are people in my life where I'll see them in real life. We can completely get along fine. We can have reasonable conversations about things. We can agree to disagree. But then I see them posting stuff on social media, and like I won't engage in. I don't use social media hardly at all. But I'll see them posting stuff that I know they would never in a million years say that to my face. And they're saying about certain groups or certain beliefs, these people are all crazy, these people are fashion. I'm like, they know that I believe that. They would never say that to me, and we'd be completely fine. So I think that's been a huge, that may be one of the biggest damages to society, is that removal of human contact throughout the COVID-19 thing. And now when it's now people keep fighting by keyboard over the internet, and that just creates that polarization. It breaks down kind of that community, and that it assists in othering people, right? It's so much easier to other people when they're just some person in the ether of the internet versus your neighbor or someone that you're actually going to encounter in real life.
yeah, I mean, it's really easy to like dismiss the power of like the soul and life and consciousness when we're just dealing with, just a short little line or a short tweet, or like, and also knowing like where those are coming from too. And a lot of people, especially within the, well, I mean, just as a little bit of context, like, I was very, active and convinced in the 9/11 truth movement. So I've watched like, the media machine like for like, almost over 20 years now. Well, since the very beginning, obviously I was like, but let's say 15 years of like observing, like, you ask, you know, 90% of people how many buildings collapsed in New York on September 11th, and they'll say two, when it was three. And it's like nobody ever investigated World Trade Center 7, and there was just so many great questions that came of it, but they just won't kind of engage. But again, and like, you can try and tell them that, you can try and tell people the truth all day long, but you can't. Like, the truth isn't really learned by being told. It's kind of, you must yourself learn the truth or witness the truth, or go through your own stages of it, of understanding. And that's why I think it's important for us, like, just like internally, like, personally, with friends, with family, in engaging with others and trying to de-escalate situations, to ask questions, in order to get the conversation going, to refrain from judgments, to refrain from, like, triggering words, or like, there's ways you can ask questions that can be pretty offensive. Trust me, I know. I'm guilty of it. I've been guilty of it as well. Um, and I'm not happy about all the things I've ever said, and I don't think anybody is. Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, and being, compassionate towards yourself about the understandings and the misgivings, and, like, the fallacies that we've all gone through in our lives, especially these last 2 years. I mean, a lot of people got like really hoodwinked by this whole thing. They went deep. They went super deep. And, like, just because they went deep when you saw it early and were like, I saw it early, but then they went deep, like, we can't hold it over them. We can't, like, use that as a point of, like, it doesn't make you better than them.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, well, and everyone has their own different backgrounds, right? I mean, I think I was able to see it earlier because I had not inside information per se, but I had information other people didn't have. Like, so just for example, I knew on day one that this COVID stuff was not what they were saying because the day that 2 weeks to flatten the curve was declared in Ontario, they closed the courts for 10 weeks. So right off the hop, I knew like, well, there's no way this is 2 weeks to flatten the curve because why are they shutting the courts? The courts have never been closed in Canadian history. I mean, I always thought I had the ultimate job security. I mean, it'll literally be the zombie apocalypse before won't have work to do. But they closed the courts, so I mean, I knew right then that at minimum they're lying about 2 weeks. At minimum, it's 10 weeks. But then the military shut down the cadet program for the year. So then I was like, maybe the army knows something that they're not telling us as well. Because why are they shutting down this program for the whole year right away? So, but most people wouldn't have access to that. I mean, I still talk to people now. People are shocked to learn that the courts were closed for 10 weeks. That wasn't reported in the news anywhere. I mean, I don't even know how you would have found that out,
right?
Unless you were involved in the justice system.
And are the courts open now?
Oh yeah, they've been open since about October of 2020. Well, they're open by Zoom for the most part. They're starting to be open in person. I did an in-person trial a couple weeks ago and didn't even have to wear a mask in the courthouse, which was a pleasant surprise to me. I thought I was going to have to wear a mask all day. Okay, so we got a question from Richard. Just put this up. So it says, question to you, Kyle. But when you see your brother, is he all like, "Hey, brother, all normal"? Or I mean, do you even see him these days? He's probably locked in a bunker somewhere, from what you're saying.
He's locked away, in my opinion. And I mean, I haven't seen him. I invited him to my wedding a year and a half ago, and he didn't show up. So I haven't seen him in a long time. And again, like, to him, like, I would say ho'oponopono, and I would like put all this shit crap aside. Like, I want to deal with him directly.
Mhm.
And I want to like, help with some of the healing that needs to go on directly. And also I want to connect with his children and his wife too, like Sophie and Zav and Ella Grace and Hattie. Man, I haven't seen these kids in a long time. I'm their uncle. Like, they're this is family. And part of why but at the same time, like, just because Justin's like in his job role doesn't mean I have to agree with that or can stand by and support it, or be silent and just like say nothing. Must stand up when they're coming after all of our children with these injectables and this this experimental, like, these experimentations. Like, no, I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna stand up, say no. I've got too many kids. Stakes are way too high. Like, and even if you're like, here's your, here's a special batch, and I'm not saying that I've been offered a special batch of placebo, but even if that's like so wrong.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's justifying the system, and even aside from the experimental aspect, to me, it's all about bodily autonomy. If we're saying that the government can tell us what's good for what goes into your body, what medical treatments you have to take, you don't have bodily autonomy. And if you don't have autonomy over what goes into your own body, nothing else matters. You don't have any other freedoms. It doesn't matter. And now, again, I say this not to blame or look down on people who took the jab, because I've seen lots of people like, well, I took it for my kids so that I can continue to support my kids. I mean, I get that, but I don't agree with it, because my view is you're actually throwing your children under the bus by taking that injection, because you're legitimizing this whole system, and people needed to have stood up instead. And it's all been a numbers game. I mean, I keep coming back to Poland because I've got family connections there, so I kind of keep abreast of what's going on there. Poland is a perfect example of when the people don't go along, the government, this stuff just fades away. In Poland, their 57% vaccination rate is the official number. I'm sure most of those are older people. Guess what? There are no vaccine mandates in that country. There's no travel rules. They said they were going to mandate vaccines for The medical, police, and military, they said that in December of 2021. By February, the government just said, well, we've only got 57%, so it's not happening because we can't fire 40% of our workforce, so no mandates. But in Canada, 90% did the, well, I mean, I don't know, people had different reasons, but I mean, that's why we are where we are, is people in Canada thought they could comply their way out of this, but by complying, you're just digging yourself deeper. And you can see examples in other countries where people, for whatever reason, but I think in Poland, it's, I was talking to another lawyer, a Polish lawyer, and he was just kind of chuckling. He said, yeah, Polish people don't trust the government. So that's why they just didn't follow along with that stuff. And when they had the government telling you must do this, they're like, no, I'm out.
I feel like most Canadians too, like we didn't trust the government, like, before we don't, but until
I don't know.
until the pandemic, until a crisis comes along, and then all of a sudden everybody trusts the government. And
well, I don't know. I think maybe people said they didn't trust the government, but you kind of wonder, did they really not trust the government to just kind of, go to that distance right away? Because I mean, just a family member who I won't name I was talking to them about this, and this is a person who has said multiple times that they don't trust the government, they don't trust the media, and then that they said, oh, well, the government wouldn't lie about the COVID numbers. I'm like, well, this is a person who said they didn't trust the government, but then, so I mean, that's why I say, like, did they really not trust the government? Or, you can say, I think people can maybe intellectually believe something, but in their heart of hearts, they really don't.
Yeah.
But let me, I just want to answer.
I'd like to switch gear for one second too, because like I remember in the beginning of this, when they said that if you were caught violating quarantine, like returning from America, there's going to be up to 6 months in jail and $1 million fine, or like $500,000 fine. And I know a couple of people got those fines. Like, have any of those, like, will any of those stand up? And on anybody who's who's like missing those five, or who's taking those like $5,000 fines, who are, saying, no, I will not quarantine, and they're just accepting, like, here, fine me, and then people will fight them. What from your side of this angle, like, where's the court system? Are those tickets making it to trial? Are those things being settled? You think they're going to get just thrown out?
That's a good question. I mean, as of right now, they're winding their way through the system. So this whole COVID thing has really shone a light on how disgracefully under-resourced our justice system is and how backlogged it is. I mean, I knew about these backlogs for a long time because I've been dealing with them on a daily basis for my whole career. But it's really coming to light now is it takes forever to get stuff into court in Canada. So, I mean, these cases haven't even made it to court. For the JCCF, I'm doing some contract work. So I've got a number of cases where people are given tickets for going to church. None of those have even been set for trial yet. I mean, part of it is because the courts were closed for so long, and then you got to get the disclosure. Now, and then part of it is we were delaying the cases because we were waiting for the Ontario versus Trinity Bible Chapel decision to come out. That finally came out in February. But that was going back to, I don't know, early like 2020, I think, that challenge. Wow. So these things haven't even gotten there yet. Now,
well, what about like municipal too? Like, I know I got I think I got a ticket in January or February of like 2020 in Ottawa. Like, I was setting my Google Maps like on my phone, and I got pulled over and given an $800 ticket for using my phone. I was at a red light. $800 ticket for that. And I was like, I'm like, there's no way I'm just gonna like write you guys a check for $800 or make a payment. Like, no way. like didn't endanger anyone. Like, you know, I was like
Right.
literally it's the equivalent of using the computer on the car. Blah blah whatever. But then I like, you know, I fight it. And I got a call, like, you know, I never heard anything about it. Plus I left the country, but I never heard anything about it. But I finally got a call maybe like 2 months ago, and they're like, "Do you want to like settle this?" I was like, "No, I want to take this to court." I'm like, "Hold on, is this still that thing from like 2 years ago?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Is the court's open?" And they're like, "Yeah, the court's just trying to open up again." This is literally like, you know, years have passed since this. So that's years of bylaw infractions, of like small civil infractions that have taken place that are just getting piled up.
Mhm.
I mean, they must be dealing with like the most enormous backlog that's just going to take forever to get through.
It
It's a
will.
huge burden on everybody. It's like you just wipe all this crap out of it. Non-violent offense, like blah, just
Yeah.
like
Well,
forget about it all.
yeah, we could have a whole discussion about all the victimless crimes that get prosecuted in our system that I think, yeah, you want to get rid of the big backlog we've got. Torpedo, like just throw all that stuff out. Maybe we can get into that, but we got a super chat here, so I want to give it the attention it deserves. From Patrick Peace again. So Patrick, thanks. So his question for Kyle: do you think Justin will find truth later in life, maybe through Jesus, Ho'oponopono, or something else?
Ho'oponopono, or something else. Maybe ayahuasca, maybe the grandmother, maybe you know, maybe the Jesuits. Who knows? I think, you know, that yes, I hope he will. I think Justin's going to, like, you know, hopefully he can find a way out of this. Man, it really sucks though. Like for him, he can't go anywhere anymore. Can't go anywhere. He went to a funeral today and got like snubbed.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
yeah. I mean, in
well,
some ways,
he
people
shouldn't
probably look
even be there. He shouldn't even. He should never even been at that funeral. He doesn't know anything about hockey. He's a terrible hockey player. He doesn't care about it. He's not really into sports, like except for individual sports. Like,
well, yeah. I mean, I got to say, he's a pretty decent boxer.
he's a good boxer.
I mean, I just watched the fight with Patrick Brazeau, but I have to say
He's a good boxer.
that was a pretty he
Definitely,
put on a
like
pretty good boxing clinic there.
he sure did. He sure did. Yeah, but we haven't seen him. We saw Stephen Harper on skates. Have you seen Justin on skates before?
No.
Nope. There's a reason.
Well, I mean, we can certainly hope and pray for Mr. Justin Trudeau, as with everyone. But you know, I mean, he looks like he's on top of the world. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. He has, to an outsider, it would look like he has really total control of Canada, right? Because one thing in principle, I'm a monarchist, and I wouldn't like Canada to be a republic. But the big problem we've got with our system, and I think it's kind of broken in this regard, is that all the power is vested in the prime minister's office because the governor general just does what the prime minister says. So it's way too much power for one person. But I mean, so it might look at, oh, he has all this power, but keep coming back to the thing is, you're saying he's a prisoner. I mean, it sounds like it looks like he has a lot of power, but it's probably actually pretty terrible life, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's an old biblical story of, I don't know, like some character on top of the mountain being offered the kingdom in exchange for the soul, and you know, he
Yeah, what
rejected the offer.
yeah, and what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but loses his soul? But for
Well,
Canada,
exactly.
Canada, but
For all the other
uh,
people, like, you know, and for that, you know, that journey of like, you know, all the short-term gain
yeah,
of, you know, of that, you know, that short-term win at
yeah,
the long term. I mean, it's like,
and,
you know, trading all your top picks
yeah,
for to put together a good run at this year's cup, and then
yeah,
losing the first round. It's
yeah.
like, no, it's like, let's take a long game approach to these kind of things.
Well,
And like, you know, and go ahead.
and the thing is, I mean, Justin Trudeau's children are going to have to live in the Canada that's being built. Same with all of our children.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I just want to mention, I saw on the screen there, Patrick Peace was saying that he thought that the boxing was lame, Brazeau was a mark. I mean, I'm not a connoisseur of boxing as a very casual viewer. To me, I actually thought it was a pretty decent boxing match. But maybe it was a setup. I don't know. But I mean, it didn't really seem like it. It seemed quite plausible because you could just see Brazeau was like, by
Brazeau was
far
a
the
3-1
heavier fighter, and he was throwing like these huge bombs.
Money at the boxing match had Brazeau at a 3-1 favorite.
Yeah.
Over Justin. People were betting on it. And was he a mark? Like I don't know. He certainly wasn't in shape. And
I think he was in shape, just that, he was throwing these huge, like he was throwing everything he had into each punch.
Boxer. Yeah, exactly.
Looking for the big knockout, and that's exhausting. Whereas Justin he used strategy and kind of danced around him, and through the punches as there were openings, and conserving his energy. And he just had the advantage just from being the. I mean, again, I'm not saying this is some person who's well-versed in boxing, but
had longer arms,
yeah,
bigger reach,
he had the height advantage.
Had strategy, had fitness, had knowledge about what he was doing. Yeah, and in the end, he tooled Brazeau. And, in the end, I don't know. I think both of them hurt their brains because they both are tools now.
Well, anyway, I just want to remind people we've been here for almost an hour now. We got the super chats running, so if you got a comment or a question or something you want to make sure we see, you can make use of the super chat, and we'll definitely answer the questions. Now, one thing I've been kind of thinking that I wanted to ask you as we've been talking here, Kyle, is looking back, like, was there something that kind of got you started on the path? Like, you talked about 9/11, we've talked about crypto, some things that are still deemed kind of non-mainstream, but things that you've got to have a certain interest in truth and searching for truth to even get into these things. Was there something in your life that kind of got you started on that path? Or, how is it that you're into this stuff and you're not like totally mainstream like one might expect a half brother of Justin Trudeau to be?
Well, I think assumptions are like, the great place to start on a bad path. But yeah, I mean, 9/11 was definitely like, I remember that day, like asking questions around that. Then I remember Ron Paul coming out and like, read End the Fed and Revolution with love spelled backwards is really nice. I thought his campaign was awesome. And there was like so much passion and like, and integrity in that man. And I think he's like, he did so great, but it was just attacked and ripped to shreds by the
he was torn apart.
Mainstream media. Whereas like, I just wish Donald Trump, I just wish like Ron Paul, like in retrospect, like Ron Paul, like just like, here's how Donald Trump did this. Like you just call CNN a bunch of crooks and liars. So just over and over again, you just like call them liars. But like, that's the difference, like, versus like, this idiocracy world versus like the intellectual world. And it's kind of a challenge. Where do we go from here? How do we make things simple?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because September 11th was for me probably something that kind of got me started into looking into stuff rather than just accepting everything I was told as well. Because I remember watching those towers collapsing on live TV because I was at home and I was in law school. I was in first year law school, but my classes that day didn't start till like 11:30 or something. So I was still at home. I remember watching it live happening. I remember as I was watching it happening, I was just, that doesn't even make sense. Like, how did that building just collapsed like a controlled demolition, like right within its own footprint? It just collapsed from a plane flying into it. And it was the second building that got hit that went down first. And I remember just like, what is going on here? This just doesn't seem like, it doesn't seem right.
Didn't make any sense. And one of them, like, this is the whole building, it was like got hit right at the top. Like, really high top. Like, you'd think of anything, like maybe it would like cringe or like fall off, but for the whole thing to Like,
Yeah.
come on.
So
Come
yeah.
on. So if
So-
like but once you understand the level of that lie and that myth and the way that that was told, then it becomes really clear to understand that like, this whole COVID scam was like no big deal.
Yeah. Well,
Like,
and with September 11th, I mean, that was a huge turning point in terms of people losing freedoms and the surveillance state. I mean, regardless, I mean, even if let's assume everything they said was true, let's say that, some Arab guys actually like flew planes in the buildings. That's actually what caused the building to collapse. That somehow their passports flew out of these infernos to be found intact on the ground. Assume that's all true. You still look at what did they do to society? Uh, like how did they take advantage of that, and what did they do to society? And then yeah, they just did the same thing because again, we complied our way right into where we are with. I mean, everyone just acquiesced. Oh, I need to take off my shoes. Oh, I need, going through the scanner at the airport. Oh, yeah, they're going to scan me and look at my wife and my daughter. They're going to look at us on the body scanner and see them basically unclothed. I'm going to let the CBS agent put his hands down my pants, and people are just went along with that. So then they're like, okay, well, we were able to pull all that off. Everyone went along with that. So let's see what else they're going to be
all
willing to
while
do.
in the background, we're going to monitor all the phone calls. We're going to put on back doors into all the handsets. We're going to do all these other things. We're going to start doing all this data sharing, intelligence sharing, all in the name of this. When questioned about the money, oh, it doesn't matter. That's not of great importance. It's one of the
Yeah.
great lines from. Oh man, but yeah, and then and now we're fast forward from that, to where we are now. Like even the trucker convoy, it seemed like they really wanted that to get like violent, or like for it to be something that it wasn't. And I feel like the mainstream and like the liberals and the bloc and the NDP like have painted, and the media, like their vision of what happened in Ottawa is totally different than what actually kind of took place in Ottawa.
Well, yeah, it's like complete alternate reality, right? I mean, I don't know if you made it down there, but I spent a weekend down there and just walking around. Like you could see what the media was saying and then see what with your own eyes what's actually going on. And it's like completely opposite of what they're saying.
Completely. It's like this bizarro world, where they're painting this, and then they come out with, okay, we need to bring in the Emergency Act to basically go after the bank accounts, and to and all these people who have funded it too. So via GoFundMe, which was basically, I think we can all, or I think it's a fair assumption to say that GoFundMe is part of the corporatocracy, and that they willfully collaborated with Ottawa police and the government towards shutting down the page, refunding the money, etc., like doing that. And then Give Send Go, which was the Christian crowdfunder, a small team, by the way, not a big company, just a small nonprofit, like that raised another $10 million, and then were hacked, and then everybody's information was all stolen. Did I donate? Yes,
Don't
I
answer that
donated.
question. Do not answer that question. This is Don't Talk TV. We're not into incriminating ourselves on live air. And I don't want your assets
I
getting
gave
frozen.
Bitcoin. I gave Bitcoin to truckers. I've given Bitcoin and made donations and supported. I was interviewing truckers on the streets. I was fighting for our fundamental rights in Canada, standing up for what it is to be Canadian, looking at interviewing the Hong Kong hodl guys who'd set up a Bitcoin multi-sig. I think there's lots of lessons that were learned from how that all happened, and we need to be conscious and aware as well that one of the challenges with like the GoFundMe, $10 million came in, and then it was like Tamara and like maybe a couple other people, but there were people within the GoFundMe kind of control room that that had the power to distribute the funds. And then, once they get to Tamara, then it's up to Tamara to distribute the funds in a fair and equitable process. And I think most people, or like, in any group or movement, people want to trust the organizers and the leaders to fairly distribute the funds. But there's weird things happen sometimes when lots of money gets involved in things.
Yeah.
And so if we can start looking at systems that don't have so much trust necessarily, sorry, I can't read that right now because I want to finish this thought, that don't have so much trust like built into them that enable like the smart distribution and allocation of funds, within systems that reduce the power of middlemen. This is how we kind of innovate past and solve these solutions. And this is a concept called of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, that are basically like, if any trucker, for example, could have been part of the DAO that was going to be receiving some of these proceeds, and they could submit receipts to it, and they would automatically get paid out of it without there being a central figure that is saying, yes, the funds can get sent to this person or another.
Okay, well, you didn't listen to my legal advice, but it's a strong move to just put it right out there. But
put it right out there. But I want to listen to your legal advice as well. But I'm going to put it right out there too. And if you want my bank account, if you want to shut down my bank account, you can have my bank account. Take off RBC.
All right. So we got a question from Bull Moose Piper here. He says, Kyle, what do you think the genesis of Justin's sellout was? Was this the classic deal with the devil where it was just selling out Canadians for money and power, or is it something much deeper?
That's a really good question. I mean, I have like maybe some theories or like, but I don't have any proof or evidence or seek to speculate. I would say he's been surrounded by a lot of people who have viewed him as a very powerful person and an individual represents great potential, and they probably sought to control and position and entrap him in some sort of way, shape, or form. And then I believe as well in the power of hypnosis, and that you keep telling somebody the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and he'll eventually start believing it, and then they'll start repeating it. I think that's happened to a lot of this is what the mainstream media did with the whole COVID scam, was they just repeated that lie so much that everybody else started repeating the lie. Then anybody who started questioning the lie, everyone else would defend the lie. You're crazy. You're anti-vaxxer, anti-science, this, that, the other. Like, so I feel like Justin's also been surrounded by people like within the system, though, who have been people of influence, and you want to kind of like appease those around you, especially those, when you're in politics, you have donors. So it's like, we're here asking for $5 super chats and $20 super chats, like, on creating content and alternative media forums. They're out there like, seeking $5,000 for like, or I don't know, $1,000, $500, $1,000 for like, for private fundraising dinners that represent deals with companies. Like, you make your full contributions as an individual, but then the company gets the deal, and then it gets the government money, and then it feeds it back into the system. There's just so much corruption, and there's so much because there's no transparency and there's no accountability. And like, I remember last year or 2 years ago, Pierre Poilievre was asking like, where's the $10 billion in infrastructure spending? They're like, we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, we don't know. Like, we don't have a central ledger that records our spending, so we just don't know.
Yeah, and the
like,
problem
what?
is Problem is, Canadians are content with that. Like, people aren't, out practically burning Parliament down over that, where
I
they should
know.
be
I know. Well,
up
and
in
that's
arms.
like,
But
but it's so good that you say that, because I mean that was like after the SPP summit protest in Montebello in 2007 was like, where that was the infamous protest where the Surete de Quebec, the police, they sent in cops dressed as anarchists into the crowd with rocks to try and, like, trigger a really violent response from the from the police against the protesters. This was protesting Vincente Fox, George Bush, Stephen Harper, I believe at the time. But the protesters, they caught them. They're like, no, we got you. You guys are cops. We know you're cops. You are cops. We've got you. And then, so what do? They like ran to the front of the line, and they end up jumping, like these anarchists, like ran to the front to the police of the police line, and ended up like jumping into the police, and the police like pulled them away. There's a great photo of, like, them. They're all wearing the same boots. And then at the time, Public Safety Minister Stockwell Day, you said this. You said, yes, we did that. Yes, we do that. And the media was like, oh yeah, he said they do that. Yes, they did that. Yes, they do that. Okay, great. Moving on. Like,
yeah,
next story. Just
and
like,
again,
no,
and the Canadian people were just
just
fine with that. So I say we've when people ask how did we get to where we are, I mean, we dug our own graves by accepting all these things that have happened that have happened before. But just going back to the Bull Moose's question, so this seems quite plausible to me, just given the family background. It seems that by your theory, and I think it seems a reasonable theory, is that your half brother was a kind of a Manchurian candidate, almost like targeted from a relatively young age, because they can see, okay, here's a good looking young guy, he's got the right last name, he's kind of interested in this politics stuff, we can make him into what we want, and then all those things you talked about come into play, kind of priming him to get to where he is now.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's like necessarily got like the novel or the movie. Like,
Oh yeah,
where
well,
he's like,
yeah. I mean, Manchurian
oh,
Candidate minus the drilling holes into your skull and putting probes in there and all that. But I mean, the thing is, I mean, the movie with, at least I've seen the one with Denzel Washington. I mean, I think it's a great movie. It's entertaining. But the thing is, these companies don't need to go to those lengths of brainwashing people and putting probes into their brains and all that. You can do it much more efficiently just by money, by kind of surrounding people with people of a certain view. You said the power of hypnosis, of just constantly telling them something. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if our prime minister is just completely isolated and kind of fed a certain narrative, so that he doesn't even really know what's going on in his own country. He just knows what he's being told. And again, you don't need to be putting
oh yeah.
probes
I
into
mean,
someone's
I
brain.
don't think there's any chance he's going to watch this. That he's watching this. That he's seen any of my talks, or seeing any of the kind of the counter side of this
Yeah.
whole thing.
And he wasn't even in Ottawa for the Freedom Convoy to
And
see
it's
what
just
was
like,
actually going on. He was
sorry,
in a
Nicholas.
bunker somewhere.
As soon as you start talking about that, I'm just gonna take the headphones off. I can't hear you. I'm gonna go read a book. Like, sorry. But like, it's that type of attitude that, like, a lot of people are like, oh no, okay, conspiracy theory. They can't deal with that. I remember asking him a couple of years ago about, like, about Switzerland. I was really impressed with Switzerland. I was like, man, in Switzerland, it's like really sensible over there. Like, they're like, the way that their democracy works, it's incredible. If you have a bone to pick with Switzerland, you go out, you get 100,000 signatures, and the whole country will vote on it. Like, direct democracy, referendums. And I remember bringing that, talking about Justin. He's like, yeah, it was just the sense that he didn't believe in the power of the people, and that the people were able or capable of making decisions effectively. And I feel like after the Freedom Convoy, he used that ridiculous word, cynical populists, to kind of label demean the entire movement.
All right. So anyway, just reminder everyone, we're Don't Talk TV live stream here. We're getting closer to the end. We've been going for about an hour and 15. We're probably going to shut it down around 8 o'clock. So if you've got any questions you want, send them in. If you want to make sure we see it, go with the super chat. One question I did see not long ago from Kim Riddell was a question for Kyle. If you were to go into politics, which party would you run for?
Am I echoing?
Not on my end. I think you were when you took the headset off and you're talking about I can't hear you.
Yeah, when like if I were to run for a party, I don't know. Right now, I during the last election, I said you should vote for the Purple Party because they're the only party that was talking about any of the issues, that being the People's Party. And I still kind of feel that way at a federal level, but I wrote a book called Canada, How We Return Power to the People, looking at direct democracy. And I think the future is not in parties, but in people, and not in political parties, but in dance parties. Like the Freedom
That's
Convoy.
what the Freedom Convoy was. There's that big, huge dance party going on. Was the corner of Essex and Wellington, I think.
I
remember walking through that thing every day, or every time we went back and forth from our Airbnb, we'd walk through that big dance party. That thing was going day and night. But our Airbnb was like 2 blocks away, and we couldn't hear anything from there.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I'm part of a group called the Decentralized Dance Party, and we've had big pop-up dance parties all over the world over the last years. And one of the organization's missions is world peace, and through human connection. And one way that you can really bring people together is through dancing and through music, and raising the vibration, raising collective vibrations. And Gary LaChance, one of his great lines is about, what if we were to dedicate war budgets to being party budgets? Like, think of, what incredible times could be had, and all those fabricated division lines just kind of washed out. Yeah, so honestly, that's a little bit of a tangent from the political question, but I do believe in decentralization and the need to remove or encourage more stewards within society as opposed to political parties, and enabling you to be able to vote on issues if you care to vote on issues. Nicholas, I can tell that you're a man who cares to vote. Probably, a lot of the people that they don't really care to vote so much, but they trust you, and they'd be willing, to offer you their vote as stewardship. And you could become a steward of their vote. And then you could similarly delegate to someone else. This is a model of democracy called liquid democracy. And I think that now with blockchain, with crypto, we have the technology to realize liquid democracy and to really give it a chance. I don't believe that Canada needs a queen or a king, as we're likely going to see soon. Like, king? Serious? I just don't believe that.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't really have a time for that debate. Maybe we'll get.
We're not going to go into that. I would love to get in that debate with you too. I would absolutely love to.
We'll have the monarchy debate. Maybe we'll do another live stream one time. We can have that discussion, because that's like a whole other thing. But it would be fascinating, actually. So we should pencil that in already for a future one. Maybe I'll come on. Your show.
Yeah, and we can also we can read out we should just read out the oath that the Prime Minister takes, the Queen's oath too, because that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Let
me ask you this, because before we run out of time, one thing I want to ask you about is, we're talking about a lot of bad stuff that's happening. Do you see good things that have happened over the last 2 years, or do you see trends that are encouraging to you? And what do you see moving forward?
Great question. Great question. Yes, absolutely. I see more light now than before all this nonsense began. This chaos that's been created is necessary to help facilitate this age change from the Bronze Age, from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. Things before 2020 were not necessarily, I mean, I know in my life it was kind of like hectic. I think like with a lot of the darkness, there's been an incredible amount of light. I think many people have had an opportunity to reflect, to spiritually enlighten themselves, to become, informationally awakened or spiritually awakened, to connect, to find more like-minded people. If you look at the field of cymatics, as you change from one vibration to another, there's a period of chaos. And in cymatics, you can use a soundboard and pass vibrations. Put sand on a on a vibration plate. You change the vibration. You change the tune of it, and as you change the tune, it'll go into a chaos state. It'll be all over, and then it will settle into these beautiful sacred patterns. As you change the vibration, it keeps going through these periods of chaos. I feel that's like what we're in right now. And one of my favorite quotes in the entire world, I say it almost every show, is by Buckminster Fuller. I've got it right here. You never change things by fighting the existing model. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that's why I speak towards democracy and the idea of DAOs, because we have this new technology, we have new opportunities to create models like Bitcoin, for example. You're not going to fight central banks, Bank Canada, the Federal Reserve, by creating the Bank of Ontario or the People's Bank of Canada. Like you're going to start it by creating Bitcoin, which is a new model. Honestly, it makes the existing one obsolete, not or unnecessary. It really is a huge threat to all the banks. So it's like looking at that, and that's our opportunity as well with democracy and systems, and a lot of our systems, look at our tax system in Canada. It makes no sense. Our judicial system. I mean, you're an expert on this stuff, Nicholas. You know how broken it is. Like we've got to fix that. We got to fix these backlogs. We don't want to just be like, oh, a terrible slog to get through all this built up action. Like, no, let's move forward. Let's solve great problems, bring together great thinkers. Let's empower people to dream, to believe, create, to not put themselves in a little silo, be it lower, middle, upper middle, lower middle, like some BS class systems. That's all just a matrix kind of prison that I would say is imparted on many people. And we have the resources on planet Earth to feed everybody, to clothe everybody, to provide everybody with shelter. We have an age of abundance is available to us. But what it will take is for us to reject and or accept abundance into our lives and freedom into our lives, and you have to say and remove our power and our attention from the pharmaceutical fascists, government fascists, media fascists, and ultimately bring justice and responsibility and accountability to them. And I think the way that we do that is by looking at the systems themselves and identifying the systems and fixing the systems and making them more accountable and responsible, as opposed to expecting the people within the system who might be perpetrators of crimes, but they're also the victims of the system, to fix their system. So on that note, that's why I really don't even believe that the PPC is a solution or that Pierre Poilievre is a solution. That's not going to fix things. They won't truly address the systemic challenges we're facing. But it's hopeful.
I think that's a really, really good point. And it kind of comes back to me, but that's why I say the courts aren't going to save us, or the politicians aren't going to save us, because you can't really expect the people and the systems that put us where we are to be the ones that are going to come and save the day. We need to build our own thing. And the quote you're reading reminds me of a quote I like to say a fair bit too, is Mahatma Gandhi's famous quote, "Be the change you want to see in the world." Instead of looking for other people to save you or just pointing out all that's bad, live the way you want things to become. And that's part of what you're talking about with building systems and that. So, but I want to ask you about the Bitcoin things. I'm definitely not knowledgeable in Bitcoin, but when I see digital currency, I think, well, isn't that going to be even easier for them to freeze and shut down than, because like they froze all the bank accounts, that stuff's online. Can't CSIS or RCMP or whoever, can't they just get a warrant or hack into these systems and freeze people's accounts?
It depends. It depends how people set up their wallets. It depends the type of wallets, depends the type of systems that are being set up. If I run my own Bitcoin node, no, they can't do anything. If I'm running like Edge Wallet, for example, no, they can't do anything. Edge Wallet, great app. Great app. Lets you store a bunch of different cryptos, set up username and password, doesn't take any personal information. And then you can set up, like if you set up Edge Wallet right now and you simply put up your QR code, like of your Bitcoin address, I could send you Bitcoin, or anybody could send you Bitcoin. Anybody in the world could just, send crypto to you. Nobody can restrict and limit that, and stop that transaction from taking place. If you keep your Bitcoin with RBC or, with Coinbase, for example, like, if you keep it with a bank, then, it's just like having cash, but keeping your cash in the bank. Like as soon as it's the bank's is the ones that are in control of it, it's really theirs, and that you just hold a promise from them. So Bitcoin affords you the opportunity to hold on to digital cash and you be in control of it. It also affords you the opportunity to choose to use a bank and to give it to a bank. And there's going to be crypto banks that are going to give you some interest rates potentially, but they're also going to demand from you like private information. And all is a step forward towards the ultimate dystopic tool, which is the central bank digital currency, the CBDC, which is basically Disney dollars, like brought to you by the government. And it would be like an app that you have to verify your identity with, or that you're given in some way, shape, or form, where they can debit you money. They can also credit money off of you whenever they see fit, based on like how good you've been. You don't really have any kind of control of it. It would be a good solution for UBI. It's probably going to be coming, despite us not wanting it. And how it will work in parallel with like to have the far end of like the surveillance spectrum, like a Canadian dollar CBDC, then to a fiat stable coin, which is just like pegged to to a Bitcoin, to a cryptocurrency, to like cash, like literally holding on to the units, to gold and silver. Ultimately though, like there's more things. Like money is important to have as a vehicle of exchange and a mechanism for exchange, but also like there's lots of other things that have value. And I think instead of like hoarding wealth or trying to hoard wealth, like real estate, food security, energy security, water security, defense equipment, hunting equipment, there's lots of ways that we can how we can invest collectively and community wise towards improving our own self-sustainability, so that we're not relying on a government or
And
the
in
government.
addition,
Expect Justin to do anything for you.
in addition to everything you talked about in terms of investments, you've got children, I've got children. I mean, to me, that's my biggest investment right there, right? Because no amount of Bitcoin or gold in my safe is going to take care of me when I'm really old and can't really do too much. But investing in family, there's people who will take care of me, because I sure don't want the government taking care of me in my old age. I mean, we saw what happened in the long-term care homes in 2020. But I think that's a perfect spot to wrap it up. We're just coming in at 8 o'clock. So I've got to do my, I'm a lawyer, so I've got to do my legal stuff. This video is obviously, it should be obvious, but we got to say it anyway, not legal advice. If you need legal advice, call a lawyer. You can either call me or another lawyer. My phone number is on my website, wansbutter.com, to get any contact information or other information about me. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. And Kyle, thanks for being on. It's been a great episode, and I want to echo the comments of one of our viewers, Bull Moose, again posted saying you're a true Canadian, and thanking you for coming onto my show. So I want to echo that. Thank you very much for coming on. Yes, Bull Moose also said it makes him proud to know that people like you exist. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bull Moose Piper, and thank you, Nicholas. And I will offer a similar disclaimer. This was not financial advice. This was wisdom. And, be truthful, fearless, and gentle. Another Gandhi quote. Go out there, live to your highest potential. Thank you so much, Nicholas. Thank you very much to Richard as well for bringing this and helping facilitate this. There's always men behind the curtains that help make things happen, for good or for worse. And let's make sure we give them acknowledgement too, shall we?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Thank you so much.
Hopefully we'll have to do this again soon, and we'll have the monarchism debate.